The tune you just heard is called On Your Toes, composed by Richard Rodgers with lyrics by Lorenz Hart. Now, what does a Rodgers and Hart song have to do with the Gershwin film musical? Well, Rodgers and Hart originally conceived On Your Toes as a film for Fred Astaire and told him about it in 1934. Astaire was in Hollywood and not much interested in a ballet musical. So Rodgers and Hart took their show to Broadway, where it became a hit in 1936. Meanwhile, at RKO Studios, they were toying with an idea of a ballet-themed musical for an Astaire-Rodgers film. And with the New York success of On Your Toes, it was all that Pandrell Behrman, the producer, needed to make his film musical.
One can only imagine the challenge of trying to come up with the next Fred and Ginger movie. It must have been pretty daunting. They didn't want to fall into a rut. They didn't want to repeat themselves, and yet they didn't want to vary too far from a winning formula.
They wanted something new here, something a little bit different, maybe something a little classier than they'd had in the earlier films.
Ballet was a trend now that was happening in the theater. It was not happening on the street corners of America, but ballet suddenly was recognized by the public as, oh, ballet, hey, that's pretty highbrow, isn't it?
What sets apart Shall We Dance from the other Astaire-Rodgers films is the music and lyrics of George and Ira Gershwin.
George Gershwin was different from the previous composers who had worked on the Astaire and Rodgers films. They were great songwriters, Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, Jerome Kern. But George had been working regularly in larger form, and therefore he loved the idea of writing ballet music, of writing other sequences that would be integrated into the film. George Gershwin and Fred Astaire met long before Shall We Dance was made. Gershwin started his career as a song plugger, working for a music publisher, demonstrating other people's songs for vaudevillians in the late teens in New York City.
Fred Astaire and his sister Adele walked in one day and struck up a friendship with George Gershwin. George remarked to Freddie, "Wouldn't it be great if I wrote a musical and you starred in it?"
And that's exactly what happened. In 1924, George and Ira Gershwin created their first great Broadway success, Lady Be Good, and it starred Fred and Adele Astaire. George Gershwin had a very long and successful career on Broadway with his brother Ira's lyrics, and continued through the 20s and 30s with many successes.
Well, an offer came in 1935 to do a film for Astaire at RKO Studios. George and Ira were no dummies. They knew that that could be very profitable because Astaire and Rodgers had a string of hit film musicals going. So they hired some agents to kind of work out a deal. Irving Berlin heard that news and told George Gershwin that you won't find a better writing situation than working for Astaire in Hollywood.
The Gershwins were not an easy sell at that time because their last hit had been about 5 years earlier on Broadway. George in particular seemed to have gone irretrievably highbrow with Porgy and Bess and with some of his orchestral music.
Gershwin sent a telegram to a friend in Hollywood that said, "Rumors about highbrow music ridiculous. I'm out to write hits." So they started negotiating in early 1936, and it wasn't until August of 1936 that they finally hammered out a contract which led to the writing of the score Shall We Dance.
I've got beginner's luck, lucky through and through, 'cause the first time that I'm in love with you.
Fred Astaire finally being reunited with the Gershwins was just an incredible opportunity. He inspired them and they inspired him, so it was a match made in heaven, it really was.
It's been said that Fred Astaire may have introduced more standards than any singer of the same period because RKO hired the best songwriters in America to write the scores for these films. So it was only natural that George and Ira Gershwin would have their turn at bat.
George and Ira arrived in Hollywood in August of '36, and nobody knew that George was going to be dead less than a year